Okay, so today's learning target is determining the effect on measures of center when a single value is either added, removed, or changed to the data set. So that's all just kind of fancy talk for finding the mean, median, and mode. If you recall, the mean is finding the average of a set of numbers. So when you find the average, you're adding up all the numbers and you're dividing it by that many numbers that you added up together. The median is the middle number after you've put the numbers in order from least to greatest. And the mode is the number that shows up most often. So anytime you get one of these problems, the very first thing you should do is put your numbers in order from least to greatest. No matter what, that's what I would do. So, least to greatest. There we go. So that 30 is my least number and 100 is my greatest number. And I'm going to do this using numbers that you would normally see when you're graded on an assignment, because that's when you really use this the most often, is when you're calculating your current grade average. So that's why we're going to do numbers that relate to that. So the very first thing I'm going to do when I find my mean is I'm going to add up all these numbers. So when I add 30 and 80 and 90 and 90 and 100, and I would use a calculator, I end up with 390. I'm going to divide that amount by 5 because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. So 390 divided by 5 is 78. So my average or my mean is 78 for this set of data. When it's in this way, I can easily see which number is the mode. The mode is the number that occurs most often. Well, that number happens to be 90. Therefore, my mode is 90. My middle number is the number that's right in the middle of there. When you have an odd amount of numbers, it's going to be exactly in the middle. So I would turn those two over and those two over. Therefore, my median is 90 because it's the one that is directly in the middle. How do I know it's directly in the middle? Well, I've got two numbers that were before it and two numbers that were after it. So it's directly in the middle. That changes a little bit when you have 6 numbers. So let's add an extra number to it and see how that changes. So I'm going to flip these back over. And let's say this student earned a 60 on his very next assignment. Okay, so when I do this, I want to make sure it's all in order. So how do you think the 60 is going to affect the student's average? Do you think the student's average is going to, or mean, is going to increase or get higher, decrease, now the average is going to be lower, or maybe it's not even going to change at all? Let's find out. So first thing we're going to do for our mean is we're going to add up all these numbers. I'm going to add 30, 60, 80, 90, 90, and 100. When I add up all those numbers, I'll end up with 450. Now, I'm not dividing by 5 this time because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers that I added up. I have to divide by 6. 450 divided by 6 is 75. Well, this student's average dropped down a little bit. And that should make sense. If this had been a higher number, let's say 90, that average may have gone up some. But because it's lower, it's 60, it's not as good, it would drop down some. If this was an even worse score, it would drop down a lot. Well, what is the mode for this? Well, the mode hasn't changed because I still have two 90s, and that is the number that occurs most often. So the mode is 90. Now for the median, it's going to change a little bit. Again, it's the middle number, but because you have an even amount, you're going to have two numbers that are in the middle. So I'm going to turn both of those over, and I'm going to turn both of those over. The median needs to be directly between the 80 and the 90. Well, what is directly between 80 and 90? That number would be 85. And if you're not sure, all you're going to do is you're just going to average those two numbers, which means 80 plus 90 is 170, and 170 divided by 2 is 85. Well, let's say your teacher gives you a chance to change your lowest score. How could that affect your average, your mean? Well, in this case, my lowest score is a 30. So let's say the student redoes that assignment, and this time got an 80. Do you think the student's mean or average increased, decreased, or stayed the same? Well, let's put them in order. You're going to add up the numbers, 60, 80, 80, 90, 90, and 100, and then add them all up. That comes out to 500. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I divide by 6. 500 divided by 6 is 83.3 repeating. So in 83, it increased. So it was really worth the student's time to redo that assignment. In this case, I'm going to have two modes. And the reason why I have two modes is that the number that occurs most often happens twice. I have two 80s and two 90s. Therefore, my mode would be both 80 and 90. If I only had, let's say, one of each, then you would say that there was no mode. But in this case, there are two. The median actually isn't going to change, because when I flip both of those over, and I flip both of those over, I'm left with 80 and 90 in the middle, just like before, and therefore the median is right between there, which is 85. Well, let's say the student didn't do one of their assignments. Let's say instead of having that 100, they decided, nah, I didn't feel like doing it. Well, that's going to change the results. So instead of having that nice 100, they have a 0 for that assignment. Let's see how that affects it. So I'm going to move these down because I want to make sure all of my data is in order. Again, what do you think is going to happen to the mean? Is it going to increase, decrease, or stay the same? Add them all up. 0 plus 60 plus 80 plus 80 plus 90 plus 90. When I add them all up, that ends up being a total of 400. Again, I'm dividing by 6 because that still counts. You got to include that. So when I divide 400 by 6, I end up with 66.6 repeating. In other words, a 66 or a 67, depending on how kind your teacher is, to round up. That dropped the average significantly. Be careful about zeros. They still add up. Well, what is my mode? Well, my mode is still 80 and 90. What is my median? My median is my middle number. And since both of them are 80, your median is 80.